Okay, welcome to our first ever Story by Story podcast. Episode 1, Story 1. We are intimidated but excited.
Super excited.
We're super excited. We feel a little out of our realm with some of the technological things, but we're stoked for what we're trying to accomplish together. And we maybe have bit off more than we can chew with our first guest because he's a little out of our league in lots of ways, but we're thankful he took pity on us to spend time with us this morning. Leah, tell us who our special and our very treasured guest is.
Today on Story by Story, we welcome Jim Sandberg, a man who's probably preached through every book of the Bible and lived through enough church meetings to write a few more, probably. Jim spent over 30 years pastoring the faithful crew at Tabor Church. He's a husband to Jennifer, a dad to 4 grown kids, and now in retirement, he's still fixing things, just with a hammer instead of a hymnal. So, Jim, welcome to Story by Story.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Can you believe you're doing this?
Yeah.
With us?
I'm excited you're doing it. I think it's a great idea.
I know when I first told you, you were very encouraging about it. You didn't know, though, we were going to rope you in as our guinea pig.
Well, I'm interested to listen to the other episodes.
I'm sure people are interested to listen to this episode.
This might be the biggest hit, I'm sure. So we want to just hear your story, as simple or as complicated.
Can you tell us about your childhood? Start from the very beginning of Jim.
Yeah, childhood is something you can only understand looking back because in the middle of it, it's just life. It's just your reality, and it doesn't even dawn on you that other people live differently. And I think the defining thing about my childhood, what turned out to be a very defining thing about my childhood, is the fact that my parents were committed to ministry, primarily in the church, but in other ways. So my mom's dad was an evangelist, a pastor, author of Christian literature, editor of a Christian periodical, just deeply involved in ministry and ingrained in his kids, including my mom, that this is just the best way to live.
I didn't know that.
This is the best thing, yeah.
About your grandparents.
My dad was not. His family, they were believers. They were serious believers, I would say. But it was when they were in college, they met in college, and it was a Christian college. My mom went to a Christian college because she always knew she would. Her family would have encouraged that.
Yeah.
And so she went to Wheaton College. My dad was in World War II, and on the GI Bill, he went to college, and only because of the GI Bill, his brothers never went to college. But so somehow somebody suggested he go to try out Wheaton College, so he did, and he met my mom there. But in that Christian college setting, they were in a time when they were in a culture where people not only took their faith seriously, but were all in all kinds of ways. And so my mom would have figured that ministry was always an option. My dad eventually came to that conclusion and they both dedicated their life to ministry, whatever that meant. And so vocational ministry was just a part of their lives. My earliest memories as I would have been in kindergarten, first grade, was living next door to the church, and it was a church-owned house because my dad was on staff at this church doing youth and music. Back in those days, there was the pastor, and then there was the second guy who did youth and music. Somehow people thought that those things went together.
They still do sometimes.
So I would go over to church and visit my dad's office and say hi to the church secretary and so on, and then after my dad left that position, they ended up teaching at a Christian college and then working in church. I think it was a part-time gig for my dad doing music work, leading the singing, directing the choir, back in the days when churches had choirs every single Sunday.
Did he play any instruments?
Piano. Oh, gosh, I wish I could hear my dad play the piano again. He wouldn't have considered himself like a concert pianist, but his heart was in it, and you could hear it in his fingers. Anyway, so I grew up in a home where ministry was like other people's dads. I'd ask them, what do you do? What does your dad do? He's an electrician. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. And my mom's sisters and their husbands were all in full-time Christian ministry. Now think about that. To me, again, that was his childhood. Yeah, of course, my uncle was a pastor. Uncle Bill's a pastor. Uncle Alan's a pastor. Uncle Walt's a pastor. That was just normal to me. Of course, that's not normal, but I didn't know that. So growing up that way, I think it was always on my radar that full-time Christian ministry, vocational ministry, was always an option. It was a familiar thing, not an unfamiliar thing. So I think it was always on my radar. And I say that was a defining thing because looking back, when I looked at my own vocational decisions, ministry was always like, that's on the table. That's a thing. You know what I mean? And if it had not been, I might not have thought of that, because I remember at the time I love mechanical things, love working on cars. I love cars. And so I remember there was a time when people asked me, what are you going to be when you grow up? And I told them I'm going to be a mechanic. I suppose I was probably 11, 12 at that time. And I thought that would be the thing. But I also remember teenager, maybe 15 or 16, by then, people were asking me what I was going to be. I remember a kid asking me, are you going to be a mechanic? I said, no. Why would I want to spend my life working on what's going to end up in a junkyard rusting? What? And so what am I going to do? Something in ministry. So sometime between the age of 11 and age of 16, I got the idea that full-time ministry might be in my future. Now, the thing to keep in mind, however, is that growing up in a Christian home, I heard the gospel. I knew all of the Bible stories. I could recite them all and liked them. Going to church was okay. The sermons were always boring to me, but that's the way it is. Evidently, these adults think it's okay because they're sitting there, although that one looks like he's asleep, and that one looks bored over there. But anyway, going to church was just part of life. Went to VBS and drank weak Kool-Aid and ate cheap cookies. And
the off-brand Oreos?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Kool-Aid?
The little, what are those sugar cookie, just the absolute cheapest thing you could possibly buy.
The ones that are circular with a hole in the middle?
Yeah. Come on, people.
Look like a flower?
Oh, but I looked forward to it.
I was going to say,
it was VBS. It was
that
part
was the
of
worst
it.
thing, and it was the best thing about VBS, which maybe is telling in some way. But anyway, so I did all those things, and life was normal. I was a good kid. I didn't make trouble at school, but that's more personality than anything else. I'm not.
Are you firstborn?
No, I have an older sister and two younger brothers, but we're all close in age. It's like your kids. Your kids are all fairly close in age. And so we grew up as this unit, you know what I mean? Get in the station wagon, and a very white middle class, again, I didn't know this, but very white lower to middle class upbringing. We'd go out and play all summer. We'd be out until dark, and our parents didn't know where we were. My parents both worked. We'd come home from school.
And this is in Tennessee?
No, this was, my childhood is in northern Illinois.
Okay.
But what I count is, and Elkhart, Indiana, a few years in Elkhart. That's where my dad was doing youth and music in a big church in Elkhart, Indiana, and then went to Deerfield, Illinois, north of Chicago, and it was very suburban
That's
existence.
when they were teachers?
Yeah, they were
Okay.
teaching at what is now Trinity International University. At the time, it was Trinity College, and serving in evangelical free churches or a Baptist church or wherever. So that's what I count as my childhood. We moved to Tennessee when I was 13.
Okay.
Oh.
Actually, almost 13. But that was where my walk with Jesus began, because I had made a profession of faith. And of course, we came from a religious background where people get saved. There's an event. You need to ask Jesus to come into your heart, or you need to, whatever the language is, or some sort of getting saved language. And so I think I got saved when I was 4 or 5. And I only remember talking to my mom seriously about the topic. That's all I remember about it. Though I would have told people After that's when I got saved.
Oh, yeah.
And I got baptized when I was 10. My grandfather, of course, baptized me because who else? And all of those things were in place. But when we moved to Tennessee, this is adolescence, right? Puberty is hit and social interaction becomes a little bit more important and a little bit more aware of what goes on around you. And the school we went to that first year of Tennessee was basically an inner city school. Of course, I didn't have any language for this. Didn't know what to expect except that it was a completely different world.
It was very culturally different too.
Yes. So it was in the South. I went from a upper middle class suburban school
in Illinois,
a junior high school, 7th and 8th grade of probably 500 students in 7th and 8th grade, and there was one black girl, and her dad was probably a doctor. Okay. To Chattanooga, where there was probably this North Side junior high was probably 400 students, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, probably 20 to 25% black, but this was in 1971. So there had been race riots 2 years ago in Chattanooga. So you could feel the tension.
Yeah.
Like the black kids are sitting over here and the white kids are not. And you could feel the tension. And I didn't get that. I didn't know what to make of that. Nobody prepared me for it. Nobody ever talked about it. But the school was very different. The classes were almost all lame. I had one or two teachers who were really good and serious about what they were doing. The other ones were obviously trying to get through the day without a fight. Other teachers. I learned nearly nothing that year. Made horrible grades the first semester. I'd always made good grades, but that just speaks to the trauma that it was.
Yeah.
My sister was traumatized on the bus. She was the subject of bullying on the bus. We didn't know that word then. We didn't use that word for it then, but I was not, but I just wanted to be invisible.
Yeah.
And I
avoid it.
was. I just went to school, never said a word to anybody, had no friends at that school, but it was traumatic. And I remember a lot of times on Sunday night literally crying because now I got to go back to school.
It hurts my heart so bad thinking of a little kid going through all that.
But the good side of that was I remembered very distinctly praying for the first time in my life. When I say that, I prayed. Yeah. On my own saying, God, help me. I remember that. I remember deciding to read my Bible, and this was a quest for help and some transcendent meaning, or I don't know what it was, but I started to read my Bible and actually did and read my Bible virtually every day. Now, the reason that's important is because back in Deerfield, I went to Awana Club where you get a badge for reading your Bible, and where church, they would ask you about it and encourage you to read your Bible, and I would always get to Genesis chapter 4 and give up, right? But here now in 8th grade at this school, I was reading my Bible every day. I read the Bible through in a year as an 8th grader. I kept my little note card so I know where I'm reading. A little cheap Bible, like a hotel Bible.
Yeah.
And the reason I did is because I needed it. And I remember...
Like desperate for help.
Yeah. And I remember making commitments to the Lord. I remember writing a date on this notebook at school. I was at school and I wrote this date. This is the date. I said, God, you can do whatever you want with me, or something like that. It was that sort of thing. My point is, the difficulty of that year was turning me toward God in a way that was not just part of the decoration of my life, but now was something meaningful and personal to me. And so my walk with the Lord began then. So now if a person asks me, so when did you come to faith in Jesus? I'm just going to tell them, I started following Jesus when I was 13. That was my first steps of following Jesus. I don't mean by that there weren't significant spiritual experiences prior to that.
Right.
Because obviously there were. But that's when I began to follow Jesus, I think. And The next year, they took us, my parents realized that this was traumatic, not only for me and my sister and my 2 younger brothers. They went to an elementary school. All of our experiences were the same. It was like it was the year from hell in our lives as kids. But remember, we had a very safe, predictable life. This was not trauma, but it was to people who were...
It got your attention.
Yeah.
Did
You
feel
felt desperate enough where you were like, where can I...
It was traumatic to a kid who had never experienced trauma.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you could talk to your parents about it? Were they approachable that way?
I think they were approachable, but I was the kind of kid, and you guys know I still am the person. I'm not going to
talk about it.
I don't have anything to say unless you ask me. If my parents had asked me about it, come to find out that first year in Chattanooga was really, I shouldn't say difficult for them. It was really consuming for them. And they probably said, we probably all came home from school with this look on our face. And so they just figured everything must be okay. They don't seem to be, they don't look traumatized.
They're not bleeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that term would even have been used, traumatized.
No, that trauma wasn't invented until the last few years.
Yeah.
It was called life back then. But anyway.
Just part of life, yeah.
That's a little cynical, but anyway. So they didn't ask any questions, and I didn't go to them and say, hey, by the way, I hate school.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not that person.
Yeah.
I'm one of those kids that you're going to have to pay close attention to find out what's wrong. Come to find out, a couple of our kids were that way too, and I didn't have enough sense to ask them either. So I don't blame my parents.
Sure.
It's just, no, I didn't talk to anybody about it. But somehow they were aware enough to know this is evidently a pretty hard year. So the next year they put us in a Christian school, which was a very fundamentalist, I think we would say today, very
Bible
fundamentalist.
Belt.
Yes. Very
Right
fitting in the Bible.
Belt.
Yeah, everybody needs to get saved and go to chapel every day and hear preaching at chapel, and they would call it that, and sing Christian songs and whatever. But that was a great experience for me because, first of all, it was a smaller situation. And then it was people with whom I felt like I had a little more in common. At least they could speak the Christian lingo. And I was very comfortable going to chapel, praying in class. Sure. I grew up with all the religious things. So all of that was just familiar and normal.
Yeah.
And we have Bible class. Great. I know the Bible. Been hearing it my whole life. I didn't know the Bible, but that was part of my thinking. And so that was like, breath of fresh air. Consequently, not being traumatized, I was more interactive, made friends. People knew that my parents taught in the university that was connected to that elementary, to that high school.
Okay.
So people knew that, and so there was like some inroads. So I tried out for basketball in that school. I never would have made the team at the public school because those guys were good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those guys were good. But in this little Christian school, I could play.
Yeah.
So I did, and then that gave me, so I had a social life. And then it was okay to talk about your relationship with God. And so I developed a friend who we would talk. I knew he went to the Word of Life Club, and he read his Bible every day. And we went to church. We sat with each other in church, a couple of friends. So that was all fine to talk about. And so that was good. My relationship with the Lord deepened at that point because of getting involved in, I would say, maybe discipling experiences with other people.
Yeah. Do you still have contact with any of
that guy that it was what I would have called my closest friend is a pastor in Ohio today. We still talk.
Oh, that's neat.
Cool.
Yeah.
We ended up graduating from high school, college, and seminary together.
Wow.
And other than that, we are so different in so many ways. We wouldn't have ever been friends if it hadn't been for history. If we didn't have the same history, we probably wouldn't be friends. Because even today, takes a little different viewpoint of some things than I do. But I love him dearly, and it's sweet to have that relationship. So my relationship, but I call those things discipling experiences. A lot of them were ministry, because we were taught, if you're a Christian, you're saved to serve. Good, but we didn't know what that was, doing stuff. And growing up in a home where I saw my parents doing stuff, I thought, well, we should be doing stuff. So we did these
cultural
Saturday morning evangelism
yeah
experiences where they just drop us off in a neighborhood to knock on doors and ask people if they were going to heaven when they die. That's
good morning.
Yeah.
Take a break from your Saturday morning.
And we woke up some of those people. We woke them up, which is a great way to talk about Jesus. Just disturb
Straight
people.
Yeah,
and let them know Jesus is the reason you're being disturbed this morning. That's great. Anyway, the good thing about all that is, even though I wouldn't do any of that or encourage anybody to do that, what it did do for me is, as a sort of a quiet kid who was comfortable alone, being by myself and leaving everybody else alone, it forced me to interact with strangers.
Because you are an introvert.
Yeah,
that
sure.
Yet your lifestyle has not allowed you to be that way. But
right. Naturally, I live in my head. It's a problem. I need therapy, but I live in my head, and everybody else is just on the outside of the windows trying to get my attention, and some do.
Yeah.
So that's just my personality. So that was good that it forced me to interact with strangers. It's bad that I dragged Jesus into some unhealthy situations, not the right word, unproductive conversations. And I wish the adults in my life had thought differently about that, but they were well-meaning people, and whose lives were worthy of emulation in some way. I had a Word of Life Club leader who encouraged me to, as all Word of Life Club leaders do, read my Bible every day, and gave me a Word of Life quiet time diary where you read this passage and then you write, what does this say and what does this mean to me? 3 lines, each of those per day. A whole week is you open it up and there's a whole week. It's nothing, right? It's nothing. But he encouraged me to do that, and I did, and I found it very meaningful. And as a 13, 14-year-old, and here's where God steps in. I would open the Bible and it would speak to me, like it would capture my attention. If you look at that quiet time diary, which it lasts for a year, it's good for a year. Early on, I'm writing big to fill up the 3 little lines. I'm writing literally 10 words. You look at the end of that thing, and I'm writing 2 lines on every line, and I'm writing in the margins. And I think that's just a physical, visual representation of the fact that Scripture was starting to capture my imagination, and I was digging into it, and I was thinking about it, and it was having meaning to me. And that, of course, was very formative, although at the time, I would have said, that's what every Christian does. I probably was still, being a mechanic was probably still on my radar at that point. You know what I mean? But looking back, I see that was formative. I remember...
Rare. For a 13-year-old...
Yeah.
To be that mature. And not mature, but like to understand the value.
Yeah. I think looking back, the only way to make sense of it, because there's lots of people whose parents are in full-time ministry. In other words, whose lives were soaking in the same juices mine were, who, number one, some don't want anything to do with Jesus, but even if they do, they just live their life going through the motions of things, it appears.
Yeah.
Or they're genuine followers of Jesus, but not in a way that would distinguish them from other genuine followers of Jesus in terms of vocation or anything like that. But looking back at it, I was thinking, why did the Bible capture my imagination and my attention as a 13 or 14-year-old? After I got done with the quiet time diary, I got a notebook, and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to study the book of 1 John. I'm going to write down my stuff. It's going to be a commentary on 1 John. And I wrote, and I remember spending an hour sometimes back in my room. Parents didn't even know about it. How would they? Why would they? remember being back there and just writing this. At this point, I probably am a sophomore or junior in high school, just writing commentary. And I'm writing down in the margin, here's another passage I'd like to study, another book of the Bible I'd like to study. Nobody's prompting any of this. So
the Holy Spirit, probably.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No human being. This isn't the result of anybody discipling me or suggesting that I do this. So obviously it was something
supernatural.
Yeah, even the other, I assume, Christian kids in my society weren't doing that.
No.
So that was something that God was he was evidently preparing me for. He was creating a taste for or whatever that was unique. Again, looking back, I say that could only have been him. There would be no other reason for that.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, in this environment where full dedication to Christ and giving him everything you have and doing whatever he says and giving your whole life to him, everybody should do that. And everybody paid lip service to that. And some people did it, right? But in that environment, really that full-on thing would have meant vocational Christian ministry. That's not healthy to think of it that way, but that's the way we did think of it.
So if you were following God, you would be a pastor or somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you had good Christians who did the right thing. Then you had the
really Christians,
sold out
theologians.
And those were the ones who you say, he's going to be a missionary or he's going to be a pastor or something like that. By the way, those are the only two vocational roles in my childhood, pastor or missionary. Thank God there was something for women to do because they couldn't pastor.
Yeah.
Not in that environment. So
for your sister's sake.
Yeah. Or you could marry a pastor.
Yeah.
Then, of course, that counts for women as full-time Christian. Understand people, I'm being a little bit facetious. But that counts.
You're saying that was the mentality.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's that world. And I say all that because obviously I'm not in that world anymore. So there's going to be more to the story. But those were significant things growing up where the Lord was getting my attention. I remember a guy coming to me and said, we need counselors at this Christian camp. Would you counsel? Okay. Meet Sunday night at such a place. The camp season starts Monday. Meet Sunday night at this particular place. So I showed up there and the director was there and he found out that I was, get this, 14.
I was going to ask that.
The campers each week were 9 to 14.
So you were on the cusp of the age.
I was the age. There were campers in cabins above me, literally on the hill, but higher, that were the same age as me, and I'm going to be put in this cabin and I have responsibility for 11 or 12 9-year-olds. Now stop and think about that. Jim, what are your qualifications to look after kids? I don't even like kids at this age. You know what I mean? I don't know anything about kids. What does a counselor do? Keep them alive. That's a main thing. And that do this and do this. And so I was teaching a Bible lesson on Tuesday morning, and I had to be responsible for these kids and do this little nighttime devotional for them, which is just aimed to bore them to sleep. But
did you come up with a devotional?
Yeah, I had to do all that stuff. I'm not qualified to do any of that stuff. Why? It was a huge mistake to hire me for that position. The point is that I was thrown into that.
Yeah.
I was thrown into that. People asked me to do things, and I said, okay. I was too stupid to know I wasn't qualified. They were too stupid to know I wasn't qualified, whatever. But so looking back, it was like God was exercising me in things that would eventually be valuable ministry things.
What's so crazy, though, I have those moments where I look back and think, oh, I was so young and stupid, but I wasn't 14. I was still like in my early 20s. Yeah. I mean, what's so powerful, it seems, is you were so young.
Yeah.
And that's what's so, I think, neat. That
I was a camp counselor at 14. Jim,
really?
Yeah. And there were kids that were the same. Yeah.
Seriously.
There's actually lots about your story already that I'm like, that's interesting. It's very similar to me.
Yeah.
Just different.
Yeah, you do have some similar aspects, Leah. Yeah, that's right.
I broke my leg at camp. I was rough and tough.
And Katie, you were on staff at a church.
I was. And that's where I would say, though, I can relate to say some of the things I did I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I had done different. Or I was
Everybody
mature enough to handle those situations. And I was 21 though. And I did camp counselor things, but still I was older. I can relate, but I'm just like 10 years later than where you were when you were going through it. I'm a little behind you too.
Well, but it's a little bit more appropriate to be asking a 21-year-old to do
Definitely.
what. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I'm at camp. I was worried about winning the swim race, and which I did.
Of course you did.
And she got
Probably
a ribbon.
because I told the girls to not do it and wasn't welcoming. And I got a sash. No,
Of course you did.
I remember at this camp they had a cabin of the week was something. It was cabin of the week and then first, second, third runner up for cabin of the week, in which you got a long horse ride, whatever that was the. And I remember thinking, I'm not going for cabin of the week. I'm just trying to get through this thing. I don't care about any of that. I'm not working for something more than survival.
Well, I wasn't the only counselor in my cabin. So there was an older kid that was in there with me. But I would take the campers out to do stuff. And I remember telling them, we had this one thing we were supposed to climb up this, big hill. And I kept telling this little girl who was 9 next to me, I'm like, you can do it. You can do it. And she fell. I was like, what do I do now? I don't even know.
That's what happens when you
14-year-old.
14-year-olds in charge of people. Yeah.
It's fine.
But
there she goes.
The interesting thing about that camp was, so I was 14. I worked there that summer. The next summer, I was 15 and I worked there that summer. And there was a couple times they said, we've got a special kid coming, so we're going to put him in Jim's cabin. Special as in one kid was from India and spoke very little English. Put him in Jim's cabin. And I remember thinking, put him in my cabin, man. But now I'm thinking, I see something going on, because when I was 16, they asked me to be a senior counselor. Now I'm not in a cabin. I'm over 6 or 7 cabins and the counselors in those cabins, and I'm 16 years old.
What's the name of this camp?
I don't even want to mention it. I'm afraid you'll go.
Okay.
I'm afraid you'll Google it.
I would probably.
Yeah. I don't know if it exists. I don't think it exists anymore.
Okay.
In fact, I'm sure it doesn't exist anymore. But very fundamentalist thing. People were getting saved, and we had to get these kids saved before they get home on Friday, that kind of thing, which is very unhealthy. It's a view of the gospel that is strange. It's not biblical, but whatever. But then by the time I was 18, I was the assistant director. I was basically in charge of all 300 kids and 20 counselors. Now,
were there real adults that were here, that were at this camp?
There was always counselors older than me. There was always counselors older than me. Even when I was assistant director, I wasn't the oldest guy on the. Yeah, there was always counselors who were in college. And at 18, I'm like a freshman in college. Now, don't read too much into that responsibility, except that it put me in a position where now I'm in charge of other adults. I'm leading not just children, but I'm leading them and managing a program a little bit. And now what are we going to do about this? And it's raining today, so now we've got to figure out how to.
A bit foreshadowing.
Yeah. And I'm just going through the motions, doing what needs to get. I don't think of this as a developmental thing at all.
Calling.
I'm just doing my job.
Yeah.
Because that's that's been my mentality my entire life.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. I worked there for 10 years.
Okay.
Did you?
Even after we got married, Jennifer and I worked for 2 or 3 years after we got married. I was still assistant director, and 1 year she was assistant director of the girls. I was assistant director of the boys, because they had boys' weeks and girls' weeks. Boys, girls, boys, girls, boys, girls. 200 to 300 kids each week. A lot of them were inner city kids, too, because it was free. The camp was free.
Oh, cool.
So people from literally out of the woodwork would be sending their kids to get rid of them. And so there'd be a lot of inner city kids, and there would be church kids, too. And again, looking back, the cultural experience involved in that was something that didn't dawn on me. Now I look back and say, okay, I was being introduced to
ministry,
different cultures, different situations. These little Christian kids who were homesick because their home's wonderful. And the inner city kids who are thinking,
This is vacation.
What can I steal out of his suitcase or whatever?
Yeah.
And just because that was their survival. And so anyway, all of those were very formative toward ministry. So at some point when I was in high school, I thought I may be involved in full-time ministry somehow, but I didn't know what. There was nothing about being a pastor that seemed to fit me in my head. Being a missionary, okay, but I don't really want to go anywhere. And still today, I'm a homebody. I like overseas travel, always glad to get home.
Yeah.
I'm not that, like we talk about people like Joel Last, just going to another country is just like fun to him.
Yeah.
Living out of his car, driving around.
I'll be very grateful for the circumstance, but I'll dread it going up to it. Being a missionary, now Jennifer will tell you, she told the Lord, if you want me to be a missionary, I will. I never said that. I think I would have.
Yeah.
If you'd asked me, Jim, are you willing to go to the mission field? I'd say, sure. But being a person who's everything's just shoved in front of your face, God's going to probably have to just abduct me and land me in Africa.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But anyway. So then by the time I got out of college, went to Christian college, and
where does Jennifer fit in here?
So we were friends in high school while she was dating.
So you went to the same high school?
Went to the same high school. We were friends, and while she was dating other people, she had a long-term boyfriend in high school who was 2 years older than
Jennifer.
her. She dated lots of people.
She's not here to defend herself.
So we were friends in high school, started dating in college, and we started dating while she kept dating other people. I didn't. No, wait a minute. Dating in that day, what it meant
Yes.
going on dates.
Right,
It wasn't
Not
a committed
boyfriend,
relationship.
That's
girlfriend.
what I thought you meant.
Yeah. But at some point, we became exclusive, and then at some point, I figured it was a significant spiritual experience for me to decide, does God want me to marry this person? It's like, this is actually a big life decision.
For sure.
Going to the college, I went to the college that my parents taught at, which gave me tuition free. I don't remember praying, God, where do you want me to go to college? I remember saying, thank God I have free college. I'm going here.
Yeah.
That wasn't a spiritually significant decision for me, but marrying Jennifer was. This is all on me.
Which is people don't hit that.
Yeah.
They don't get it.
Did you have a confirmation of some sort, or were you?
Well, yes, and again, it was God meeting me where I am because, I'm just so stupid. But I remember one night wrestling. I felt like it was wrestling because I was probably a junior in college. We'd been dating.
This is at Tennessee Temple?
Yeah.
Okay.
And dating now exclusively for a while. And I realized we either get married or break up because this isn't right to do to her.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have great aspirations. I would have said, of course I want to get married.
Well, and she's got them lined up around the door.
She's got
Move
plenty
along.
to choose from. Come to find out, even after we were engaged, she had guys hitting on her, and she had to decide how to think about how to deal with that. Anyway, I just love to kid her about that. So I remember wrestling with it one night, and this verse comes to mind from Psalm 37. Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he will bring it to pass. And in my mind, he will bring it to pass was what God has in mind. It was God's way of saying, you just trust me and it's going to be okay. Now, we were in a relationship, and so I think it was God's way of saying to me, yeah, this relationship stays. Just God's got this. This is what it is. This is what it will be. The relationship stays. Say, okay, then I guess we're going to get married. And it was shortly after that I told her that I loved her, not before then, because love means marriage. You don't throw that word around.
Not the L word.
Not the L word, because love means marriage. You don't love lots of people.
Sure.
You might love somebody and break up, and that'll be a huge tragedy in your life, literally a tragedy in your life, but no. So then I felt like I had a reason to tell her I loved her. And then she knew that if I told her I loved her, that meant we were going to get married. We didn't talk about marriage. God knows we didn't talk about squat.
You're just gazing in each other's eyes.
We just,
Smitten.
we just needed so much counseling and discipling and slapping around, and we just didn't know it. You know
And
what I mean?
you're how old at this time?
20.
Yeah.
We got married when I was 21. She had just turned 22, and I was 21 when we got married. So this was a year and a half before then. Yeah. So then eventually I proposed, and we got married. And she, by then, we both thought that I was going to be in some sort of full-time ministry, didn't know what. But so she was signing on with me, was signing on to that. Mm-hmm. She knew that, and she was all up for that, and that fit her. She had told the Lord, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And so doing this was like, okay, that's the answer to whatever you want me to do. Marry Jim and be involved in whatever ministry he's part of.
Lee and I talked about this earlier. It's unnoticed and unrecognized that women oftentimes are called to. It's just they're not the focal point. But I would say very strongly Jennifer was called equally to be in ministry alongside you. But
well,
I mean, she's gifted with with how you guys have
and in my
served.
background, and yours too, probably, Katie. I don't know about yours, Leah, but probably that called to, that word, a calling, was used a particular thing. That was a burning bush moment where God says, you're going to the mission field or whatever it was. I never had one of those. Yeah. I never had any burning bush. Everything about was like, I guess this sort of makes sense. I guess this is the right thing. And I've often told people, I said, no, and I think this is still true, no job that I ever had was when I applied for some jobs, and every time I applied for a job, it went nowhere. Every job I have had is because somebody say, hey, Jim, would you consider X, Y, Z? I said, okay, everything.
That is crazy.
It's crazy, and it speaks to my lack of ambition and the fact that God knows Jim doesn't have sense enough to knock on a door. I'm going to have to open the door and shove him through it.
And it shows the value of good community and people around you.
Yeah.
You know, that
even though I didn't know anything about community then. What's church? It's a place you go on Sunday. That's
right.
what it is.
Yeah. How God works when you're not.
He was putting people around me like that Word of Life Club leader, like a teacher he was a teacher, my basketball coach in 9th grade at this Christian school. I remember him pulling me aside and saying, you seem a little bit off. What's going on? I remember having the conversation. I don't remember what I said. I don't remember what he said after that. But he was showing an interest in me.
Yes.
Right? And clearly the Lord was putting people in my life to just push me down a tube, a funnel. And I feel like my whole life has been just me going down a funnel, not not seeing a variety of things and choosing one, but being funneled into a thing. And, I graduate from in the middle of college, a teacher says, hey, you should be in this major. I've told people when my first semester freshman year, Christian college, I majored in Christian education. No, education. I don't know if I want to be a teacher, but it doesn't matter when you're a freshman, put education. The line's short. This isn't anything online. You actually get in a line to sign up for a thing. Mm-hmm. The line's short, I'll be education. But then I had a psychology class, and I love that. So second semester, I said, I'm going to major in psychology. Again, it doesn't matter, major in psychology. Sometime during that freshman year, this professor comes to me and says, we just started a new major called Pulpit Communications. Jim, you should be in that. Okay. Why did he think I should be in that? I have no idea. I have no idea to this day. No. I just saw him last fall. He's now retired. And I heard his story for the first time, which is interesting. You should have him on this podcast. That'd be really great. Anyway.
That'd be great.
So I end up being in Pulpit Communications. Who does that throw me in with? What other students are taking Pulpit Communications?
Preachers.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm taking a lot of speech, a lot of communications. It's a communications department degree.
Yeah.
and a pre-seminary degree. So I'm taking Greek, and I'm taking homiletics, and I'm taking all these things. By the time I get done with college, I guess I'm going to probably, I got to be involved in ministry. That's what I'm trained to do. What am I going to do? I don't know. I guess I go work for a church. And if you'd asked me, I said, yeah, I probably would have spoken confidently, but actually I thought, I don't know what to do but apply for a church position. So wouldn't you know it, one of the guys I graduated with, we graduated from May, he went to a church in Ohio. I kept working at the church part-time that I was youth director in during seminary. Jennifer and I, we did youth work during seminary. It was wonderful in that I just love those kids today, but I just was so clueless. They needed a Zach and Leah. That's what they needed. But they got a Jim and Jennifer. But
Jennifer are pretty great.
Yeah, Jennifer was great. Anyway, this friend, we graduated from seminary, and he goes to Ohio, and I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do in the fall, and I'm applying to different places. Whatever I hear about, crickets. And Tom, his friend, says, hey, Jim, I'm up here in Ohio, and they're looking for another staff member. I think you might be good for it. I said, okay. They gave him my name. They asked me to come up for an interview, and I interviewed. I talked to 2 people for 10 minutes, and they offered me the job. Okay. So we moved to Lima, Ohio.
Did you have any kids at this point?
No kids. Packed up in a 14-foot U-Haul and pulling our little Subaru and went to Ohio. All 4 kids born there, 7 years in Ohio. I was pastor of young married couples.
So it was a pretty
Understand,
big church.
we'd been married 4 years, and now I'm pastoring young married couples. I'm pastoring my peers.
Again.
Yeah, I'm pastoring my peers. They're all having babies. We're having babies. We don't know anything about babies. They don't know anything about babies. And I'm their leader. That was a foolish thing to do, humanly speaking. But they were very formative years. And again, God brought important influences into our life. We made some friends, some relationships we still have today with people there. So that was God throwing me into a thing. And it was then, I think that was a real incubator for me, because it was then I was trying to think, okay, what is church really all about? Having been in a church every Sunday for my entire life, I began to ask, wait a minute, what is this? I'd already been through seminary. I'd already studied Greek and Hebrew, but now I'm asking, what is church? And in Lima, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's good things going on there, but there was also foolish things. Yeah, foolish things going on. Typical foolish things. They happened because they were typical, but not biblical. And so I began to see that, and began to question it. It put me in a little bit of conflict. Not conflict, but tension with the senior pastor, who was a good man, and I learned a lot from him, and I appreciate so much his influence in my life. But I brought up some things to him, and he quietly listened and nodded and sent the kid out. That he wasn't going to do anything I said.
What were some of the things?
Like when the church youth director started an affair with one of the kids in the youth group.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
And it came to light, and he was going to do what everybody else does and just sweep it under the rug and dismiss him. He was going to fade off into the
but not talk about it.
Not talk about it, not tell anybody about it, not address it. And what about the family of the girl who's still in the church and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't do nothing. And for a while there, as it was starting, he was just telling him, you shouldn't be talking to that girl. What? If he's talking to the girl, it's already done. You don't manage that situation. See what I'm saying? But he didn't like the conflict, whatever. And so I think, this isn't, what's going on here? So the whole thing about church discipline was one of the things that I had to think through for the first time. And then to divorce people. What does the Bible say about divorce? I remember thinking about that in seminary, arguing about it with my friends, but it was all just academic. Now here's this woman who's had an affair with somebody in the church. Now, what am I going to say to her? What am I going to say to her husband? What about that other guy in the church? What are we going to do about that? So all these situations come up, and I have to think this through. So think through, what is the responsibility of church leadership, and what should a church be?
What should it look like?
Yeah,
Too? Was it probably situated differently too? There probably weren't elders, I would imagine.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, there was a staff of a senior pastor
Who was basically the guy.
Who basically made all the decisions, or whatever decisions the trustees would let him make, because the trustees ran the money.
Sure.
And then there was the deacons.
Yeah.
Was a bunch of people who were happy or unhappy that the pastor just managed, told them whatever he wanted them to hear. Now, it makes him sound sinister. I don't think it is. It's just a very broken system. There's a lot of good people and a lot of good things happen, but there's a lot of brokenness in that whole system.
There's a lot of not good ways for anyone to have accountability either. Like anyone.
Yeah. Wait a minute, accountability?
Right.
Yeah. And nobody held me accountable either. So they were just trusting that I would doing something and earning my paltry pay, because we weren't paid very well. But it was more than I was getting in Chattanooga, so I went up from $200 a week to $300 a week in Lima. Yeah, we can live on that. Sure, no problem. Then we had 4 kids, so now I'm making $330 a week. Anyway, but that was like, I'd signed up for ministry, not money, so it just went with the thing. So anyway, then came to Tabor, and now there isn't anybody telling me what to do, or there isn't anything that I can't speak into at some point. So now I have to say, God, what do you want this church to be?
Because you went from young adult or young marrieds to then lead pastor here.
Yeah. And at the time, there was 4 deacons, good men, couple.
You didn't apply for this job.
I sent an application, and then there was a questionnaire.
And that
long questionnaire of some good questions and some irrelevant ones. Actually, this is funny. When the pastor who'd been here 7 years applied, resigned, and then he told the church about me, and they asked me to send a resume, so I did, and a questionnaire or whatever. I actually got to the final interview with another guy, and they chose the other guy here at Tabor.
Oh, really?
They chose the other guy. And I heard after the fact that the main reason was there was one guy on the pulpit committee who dug his heels in about the fact that I used the NIV some. I was still at that point preaching from the King James Version and referring to the NIV and using it other places, and he was uncomfortable with that. And so they chose the other guy. And that was a key difference between us. That guy lasted 11 months, not because he was a bad guy, but because he got caught up in unhealthy church politics. He didn't know he was getting caught up in unhealthy church things, and being caught up into it, he was the lightning rod and or the scapegoat, or whatever you want to say. So they ended up taking a vote of no confidence in him. He did some unwise things. I think he would say that today too. But
yeah.
So then they called me back and said, they called me the first time. I did the interview. They said, no, thanks. Okay. They called me back and said, that pastor's gone. Would you consider applying us? I said, yes, but I've got a whole lot more questions now. I'll send you a questionnaire.
Yeah.
Nice.
But the good thing about that was Tabor had gone through a very difficult time around all that. And by the time I got here, they had scrapped the building program that they had been working on with that other long-term pastor, and they were down to about 90 people. But that creates a lot of humility, creates a lot of concentration of fellowship and ministry. So I came into a church of 90 people, many of whom were hurting and a little jaded, maybe, about. So I could come in here, and my personality is just to love people and take things slow and don't listen and comfort and shepherd. That's my personality. That's the kind of person that a church like that needs. One of that 11-month pastor, one of the mistakes I think he made was having great ideas. and starting them day
Quickly.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a part of the mistake that he made. But I'm not even wired that way. I would have even said that's a bad idea at the time. I didn't even think of that. I'm just not wired that way. So I was able to walk with these people and develop some relationships. But now, to your point now, I have to think, okay, what should a church be? What does genuine Christianity look like for this guy that works at a factory, and this person who is a school teacher, and this person who's... I was thinking about those things in Lima too, but now there are people of all ages, right? And I have some responsibility for what's going on with the teenagers here and the children and the older people who are retired. And what does it look like? What should their Christian life, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see that. What should their Christian life look like?
Because you had been told if you were really Christian, you would go into vocational ministry.
And because I wasn't those things, because I wasn't working in a factory and or whatever it was, I didn't bother to think through what Christianity looks like that. And of course, we come to Lima and our youngest child was 2 months old. So we had kids from 5 to almost 0. So I'm also thinking about what's a Christian parent actually look like? I'm going through that. And so all these things come to play in this and become the context and the soil in which I have to ask, what does God really want about X, Y, Z? Not just what was I always taught or what do I assume, but actually what does God want? And assuming that God would tell us in Scripture means I go to the Bible and I study this. We have a person at church at Tabor who was never baptized by immersion, never joined the church because she was never baptized by immersion and didn't intend to be. She's baptized as a child. That keeps her from being a member at Tabor because she had to be baptized by immersion. And so she was all fine with that. I was not. I felt like maybe she just doesn't understand what Scripture says. So I asked myself, what does Scripture say? The Bible teaches X, Y, Z about baptism, but doesn't. I can't just tell her things that
you think
that I've always thought or lived. I got to figure this out. So I remember studying baptism, looking up every use of that Greek word in the New Testament. Say, look, if I wasn't raised the way I was, if I wasn't a part of a church, if I was an alien on another planet, what would I think he's talking about?
on the Bible.
Yeah, based on the Bible alone. And so I wrote that up, and I remember presenting that on a Sunday night here. We had Sunday night services. The good old days, dominating people's weekend. Anyways, I remember presenting it, and she had no response to it at all. She was the reason why I did it, why I studied it. Having studied it, it was good to present it to people to say, this is why we do this. This is why we immerse. This is why people share their testimony. This is what baptism is for. See how it says here, what it says there, what it says. So now I was in position not listening to other people teach, but in a position of saying, what does God actually want from these people?
Yeah.
Not being a denominational church means it had no denominational direction. I think it's great to be part of a denomination. There's great benefits from it, but not having it meant, God, what do we do here? Nobody's going to tell us this. Changes we make as a church, we've just got to figure out. I say we because there's certain things that I thought needed to change to be in line with Scripture, but how are we going to get there? The whole thing about elders and whatever. All of that was the results of saying, what does God actually want churches to look like, operate, how function? What's genuine community? What do these relationships, how are they different from just friend down at the club or what? Asking those questions and coming to answers. While I'm pastoring, I'm figuring out what church I'm investigating what church is supposed to be. So again, Jim's late on everything. He's
leading the blind.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm in charge of young married couples, and Jennifer will tell you, our marriage, we didn't have a clue figured out about marriage, and now I'm pastoring. I'm leading children, didn't know anything about kids. I'm always put into things that are over my head, that I don't think I was actually prepared for. But for some reason, God doesn't mind doesn't mind you doing things you're not prepared for because it's there that he intends to prepare you for them. You don't want a doctor who's learning on the job. You don't want a doctor to say, I've never done surgery before, but there's only one way to learn. Lay down and breathe this in. And No, you don't. But actually with life, there's a whole lot of that. There's a whole lot of people just in the middle of it figuring out, which is to say, Jesus is the shepherd of the church and the Holy Spirit is active. And it's not about our systems of preparation and education. We've talked about like with premarital counseling. Really?
You can only say so much.
Yeah, and it's not enough, and it can't be understood, and some of it can't be understood until you do it. So what do we do? Marriage and life is a figure it out as you go. But
that was parenting.
What?
Parenting. Also.
Yes, absolutely. But the thing is, you're not figuring out as you go. God is baiting you and opening doors and providing and resourcing you all the way. God's figuring it out as you go. And you're just experiencing it as what's going on at the time. I think that's true for maybe everybody, or at least lots of people. We don't know what we're doing. We haven't got this figured out. We feel unprepared for this. You guys may have felt this in the podcast. Who do we think we are doing a podcast?
Yeah, for sure.
But what did you say to yourself? We'll figure it out as we go. Right. Everybody does. We figure it out as we go. We don't get all the answers ahead of time. We don't see the big picture. And my life is just a vivid example of nothing but the next step in front of me, and not traumatized by that. I'm not interested in 5 steps down the road. I wasn't even curious. What an idiot. I wasn't even curious about 5 steps down the road.
Yeah.
And good thing, but I think that's God meeting me where I am and saying, okay, this is the next step. Okay, somebody's going to have to call up Jim and offer him a job because he didn't have enough sense to go look for one or look for the right one or whatever it would be, you know what I mean? The sovereignty of God. That's the point, I think. It's not about whether Jim's an idiot. He is. But the point is that all of us are lame. We're all in over our heads. Life is over our heads.
And it reminds me thinking, I relate everything right now to parenting. And I think of my kids. And it's just a really good reminder to not think that you can control their destiny, their future, because you weren't prepared. You were in good environments. So that's a benefit. It's not like it's a bad thing, but it is just between you and God. It's like there's nothing you could prepare. There's nothing you could plan.
Yeah. No, you don't know
until yeah. And you always look back and you see it so differently, what you've been through and how it's directed you and you didn't realize, and people who aggravated you then, or maybe they taught you something. I don't know. It just feels it's maybe a good thing. It's maybe why God got a hold of you so young, is you didn't have this obsession with control and projection of what the future may look like. It was one step at a time. And I envy that, because I could easily be like, let me plan out my next 5 years. And even for my kids, it's a good reminder to be like, it's nothing that I can do. It's nothing that I can determine. It is such a personal.
Like on the subject of parenting, and you guys have kids in the house, I look back and I see that what my parents did was live their life in a generally authentic way. I would have said about my parents at every point, never did I disbelieve that my parents were sincere, committed, lovers of God, believers in the Bible, followers of Christ. And they meant it. They weren't hypocrites. It was real for them. So I was raised in that environment. They didn't disciple me. They didn't say, Jim, you need to be involved in Christian ministry. They got in the car and drove me to places because
they lived it.
Yeah. They facilitated the things that God was doing in my life. But it was God who got a hold of me. They weren't there when I was studying my Bible and writing my commentary on 1 John. They didn't know that was happening. They didn't do that. I went to those evangelism thing. I went to this camp. That was more of a nuisance to them. It wasn't something they structured or organized. Even going to that Bible club, I went because I was able to walk to it from wherever I was, and I didn't have to disturb my parents. They probably didn't even know I was going until I was going. My point is that what did my parents do for me? They provided safety, and they provided a good example, and they made reasonable decisions regarding my upbringing. They disciplined us. They taught us character issues. They taught us to be responsible, socially acceptable people. They did all that, but they didn't give me a relationship with God. I don't think they thought they could, but they didn't do anything they didn't evangelize me. They didn't disciple me in the ways that we would use that word. But what they did was all part of my formation, and God did the rest. And so that's why I say to parents now, I say, you pray that that Jesus will reveal himself to your children in a compelling way that causes them to follow him. But he's got to do it, and how he's got to do it, and when he's going to do it, that's really not up to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think you guys, that's why I have confidence in your kids, just personally, is because I know what your kids are seeing, because I see it. I know what environment your kids are growing up in because I know something about you. So I say, I want to say your kids are going to be fine. What I mean is they're growing up with all of the advantages that parents can provide. Okay, now it's up to God. They can say to God, screw you if they want. They might. That won't be your fault. Mm-hmm. And if they become the greatest examples of Christian discipleship that ever lived, that won't be your success either. You know what I mean? That's up to God. And I think my life demonstrates that. I had all these advantages, but ultimately it's really, you look back and say, what God did sovereignly and miraculously and coincidentally, or whatever you want to say, were the defining things about my life. Parents just created the soil in which that could grow.
Now looking forward, your retirement, how do you feel like your ministry, because everybody has a personal ministry outside of full-time employment and ministry, but it's a transition of figuring out that balance of, I worked full-time in ministry and then I didn't, and it's a weird transition of still being looked at as someone who's in it, and then also I always like guilt of not doing enough, but also it wasn't my livelihood anymore. And so are you catching your balance in that realm?
I would say I'm still, this is an interesting transition, and I have to remember that it's really up to God to deploy his people and to make good use of them, and our role is just to be available. I was confident about the decision to resign at Tabor. I'm still confident about that. I don't second guess that. There are things I miss about full-time ministry, pastoral ministry, exactly the things I expected to miss. So no surprises there. I am content not to be in full-time ministry. I only want to be useful. And to answer your question, I don't really know exactly what that's supposed to look like over the next 20 years. Jennifer and I are both still waiting on God to make that clear. Or what we might see is that looking back, he was doing it and we just never knew he was. We may live in this sort of, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I know what I got to do today, but I don't know what this stage of life is supposed to look like. Yeah. I'm waiting to be funneled. And then in the meantime, just take whatever opportunities come and whatever. So I have some ideas about how that might pan out, or maybe should pan out, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Going backwards a little bit, what would be like the most significant thing as a pastor? So it could be Tabor, it could be somewhere else, but what was something that really maybe even broke some things in you in your relationship with God? Or what was also something that really pushed you to Christ and grew you more? Like, what were some situations?
Pivotal moments.
Yeah. Throughout your time as in ministry thus far.
I could probably point to a handful of crises or difficult things in ministry, things going on in the lives of people, things going on in the church, some church conflict, or this person having a huge spiritual crisis or whatever. I could point to a handful of those things that were that developed me. But they're just in the ways they are for everybody. When a man leaves his family and, oh, by the way, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore, and leaves his family, that's a traumatic thing. In a church that's relatively small, as Tabor was, that was a church crisis. He had been very involved and very well thought of, and when he walked away, that caused a lot of people it was traumatic for a lot of people. And I'm interacting with him, I'm interacting with his wife, I'm interacting with their kids, Jennifer and I are, and then church people are saying that if that's true for him, what about me, or how did this happen, or whatever. And what do we tell the church people? What should be public and what's private? And walking through all of that is very growing. It'll develop you if it doesn't break you. So there's several things, a handful of those things. I think one thing that I always come back to is the first time we called it a sabbatical then, but it was a month long, and I had been here probably 10 years. No, not even 10 years, probably 7 or 8 years. But it was just a month long, and I wasn't preaching, and I went off someplace, and I've said this, you guys have heard me say this, but I decided I'm going to read all 4 of the Gospels, each of the Gospels in one sitting. I'm going to read Matthew straight through. I'm going to read Mark straight through. I'm going to read in an effort to say, okay, let's go back to the basics. If the only thing I knew about Christianity was the beginning of Christianity, what would Christianity be like? And that experience was very transformative to me, and it was a breaking experience. And I remember doing a lot of crying because I realized that in everything that I had been doing, teaching, thinking, and feeling, it was a lot about a philosophy and a goal and a purpose, but it was not a lot about a person. It was not a lot about following Jesus. And I remember coming home and telling Jennifer in tears, I feel like I have been in pastoral ministry, but I haven't been following Jesus. I've been paying attention to that. And that led to a series of sermons, which is really my processing out loud the things that I had learned about discipleship. And so I think that was, and there's ways in which that still colors my ministry, my thought processes, the things I say, probably what shows up in my sermons, I'm sure. So I think that was a really definitive thing and again, the Lord just did that for me. I don't know why I don't know where it came up with the idea. I'm going to read each of the Gospels in one sitting. Just going to read straight through. And I did that walking around. I'm setting the Bible places. I'm just reading it. But wow, it just hit me that it's really about following a person, knowing a person, listening to a person, being like a person. That's what this whole thing is. That's what these people out here that I'm talking to every Sunday, that's what they should be doing Monday. That's what they should be doing. So now thinking in that way, so that was really transformative.
Would that be like one of the most memorable sermon series maybe that you preached, do you think?
Memorable to me?
To you.
No. I mean, I don't know that none of my sermon series are particularly memorable to me.
We would beg to differ.
Yeah. I would say, I don't really know because I don't preach sermons, but is there anything that you're like, this is heavy, that it made a big difference in my life and I have to tell you people? Is there a sermon that you're like, that is what I wanted to tell? That is straight from God. He has changed my heart in this. That's why I even thought maybe that was
Well,
some of the sermons that you...
There's certain things that I know are an emphasis that show up a lot. And there's certain things I know, and I know it and I intend it. Now, where did those things come from? So my emphasis on Jesus and reading the Gospels, because you hear me say that a lot. You should just read the Gospels. Just read it.
Yeah.
And that all comes back to that. And I think that sermon series that I preached after that would have been very personal for me because I had just been interacting with it probably in a deeper way than a lot of my sermon series would be. But other than that, I've just preached books of the Bible, and they all impact me. Every sermon series I ever preached, I thought, boy, this is really a cool book. But then I think that about the next one and the next one. So looking back, I don't know that any of them particularly stand out. Mm. Yeah. I mean, there's certain books that I think that surprised me. So I remember them because they were surprising to me, like how really practical the book of Leviticus is. Mm. I remember thinking that kind of thing. I didn't expect that to be practical.
You don't hear that very much.
I expected everybody to hate the sermons as much as they hate reading the book of Leviticus.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's hard
and
to
I
read.
expected to hate preaching it. And it turns out none of that was true.
Have you preached through all the books of the Bible?
Not all of them. I haven't preached all of the minor prophets.
Okay.
I think I've preached all of the New Testament, and some of it multiple times, obviously, but there's some books about it. I've never preached the Song of Solomon, never intend to. Not preaching that.
How come?
Everybody should read it. You should read it. You don't need to be hearing that on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Not because somebody else can preach that maybe and it'll be practical. I've just got nothing to say about the Song of Solomon.
You're like, it says it for itself? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm probably so.
You don't have to interpret.
Also, I'd have to do a lot of studying because I don't really get it. There's parts of it I know what the whole thing is about in general, but I have to do a lot of study on that, so I'm not preaching that. And some of the minor prophets are a lot like other minor prophets. It's valid, but it's not going to be that different from the other minor prophet or whatever. So I think it's fine to preach everything, but I have not, no.
What's up for parenting? What do you think? How do you think your kids did being pastors' kids? And how did you? I know that the culture was probably different and the expectations were different. We talked about that, like when they were being raised, or even when you were being raised, and even now. So, how would you say? How did that look
for our kids?
Yeah,
I'm very grateful. I take absolutely no credit for it. It's just the mercy of God that 3 of our 4 kids are committed followers of Jesus and involved in a local church, seriously involved in a local church, in the community and in serving in that church, which is, you mean they don't hate the church growing up in a pastor's? That's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful thing. At the time, we were very conscious of the fact that a lot of pastors' kids are traumatized by the experience. I have cousins traumatized by the experience of their parents being involved in ministry and what churches did and whatever, you know what I mean? So we were very conscious of the possibility of that. So we didn't place undue expectations on our kids. You can't do that. You're a pastor's kid. I never said that. Would never say that. That's ridiculous. First of all, no kid needs that pressure. Secondly, it's just not true. There's no different expectations on that kid than any other.
It's very unfair to have expectations.
We knew we couldn't keep our kids from knowing certain things when there were problems in the church. They're not dumb enough to not know those things are happening. So we tried to tell them some things. Talking to them now as adults, they would say, we should have told them more. They would have benefited from a little bit more explanation. But we did try not to keep it from them when things happened. And whatever. So anyway, I think the fact that they don't think church is a horrible idea is the mercy of God, and I'm grateful for that. people of the church love them too.
I like your kids.
So that helps.
We always take our dedication super serious because we're like, we know that we can't do it all for them. And how nice would it be if we could? But yeah, it takes community. And I actually get irritated when pastors' kids use that as like a trigger or a frustration. I know it comes with its set of problems, but I'm like, we all had issues. We all had things. It shouldn't deter you from moving forward or finding that.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot of kids will say that pastors' kids are more rebellious or more wild. It's like, not really. They could be, but I don't think it's a pastoral thing. I think it's a kid thing.
Yeah. I think, too, there's a lot of posturing. I'll put it this way. Vocational ministry is a temptation to posturing. You feel like you need to appear a certain way.
Yeah.
You need to act a certain way. People will be traumatized or distracted if your humanity shows too much. And so a lot of times in ministry, there's a temptation to do that. Well, kids won't stand for that. Mm-hmm. They know it. You're not, unless you're going to be posturing literally 168 hours a week, then your kids are going to know when you're acting a different way.
Yeah.
That's what makes them cynical and frustrated.
Yeah, sure.
And the fact that my parents, even when certain stupid things were being said from the pulpit or by other Christians, the fact that my parents didn't reinforce the stupidity and they continued to live reasonable, godly lives and not fall in line with dumb things is why I could say Christianity is real.
Yeah.
So, some Christians do crazy stuff, but Christianity is real, and that's the bottom line. Now, we could have rebelled against that. Theoretically, we could have rebelled against that, but I think that, and like you were saying, Katie, if your kids simply see that you're being real, one thing I appreciate about you and Elliot is the fact that you're not trying to hide your humanity or your struggles. You're living your real, authentic life, and your kids are seeing and hearing that. Now, they don't tell you that now. They don't know that they're seeing reality. But again, this is the air they're breathing. They see you in community. They see you being vulnerable. They see you depending on your church body. They don't know they're soaking that in, but they're soaking that in.
I hope so. Yeah.
They have to.
Yeah.
That's what childhood is. You're just soaking in whatever's in the soil you're sitting in.
Yeah.
You're soaking that in.
Oh, yeah. You can't help it.
Yeah.
I would say the thing that I would want to ask you would be, what would be like a piece of advice or something that you would give any believer now, having gone through all this, like 30 years of Tabor and all that, and just life? Like, what would be something that you would say in a relationship with Christ or church or anything? What would your takeaway be for a believer?
I guess I probably have to go back to the thing I always go back to, and that is, in the words of Dallas Willard, not what would Jesus do, but Dallas Willard said, what would Jesus be if he were me? If Jesus were a 67-year-old retiree living in this area with these relationships in this church or whatever it is, in these circumstances, what would he be like? And that needs to be my goal. Not first of all, and I'm saying this some trepidation because this is part of what I'm wrestling with. Not what should I be doing in my retirement? Because I ask myself that a lot. That's not really the main thing. The main thing is, what should I be in my retirement? What would Jesus be like if he were me? What kind of a grandparent would Jesus be? Especially if he had my personality and he had this body. What would he be like? That needs to be my focus. And I immediately comes to mind, he wouldn't do 6 things you're doing right now, that I'm doing right now. Yeah, that's right. But that needs to be the focus first. And then what should I do? I'm not sure, but my life experience has been a lesson in God shoving me into things. And I think I just need to assume that he's already doing that. So when I have a conversation with somebody on Sunday morning, I just need to assume this is a God-ordained conversation. And I need to quit joking about the Pacers and talk about, what's this for? How can I encourage you, or do I just need to listen to you, or whatever? So those do things will come to you probably. The be things are what we need to focus on. I'm struggling with that. That's my current challenge myself right there. So I guess I'd say that's for anybody. And that's all I have to say about that.
We could go on and on.
Sure could.
And maybe we will. Maybe we can rope you into doing it again sometime. But sincerely, thank you for giving us a chance and trying this little.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for asking me.
I speak for both Leah and I. We look up to you a lot.
We do.
And we feel very honored. And I've thought this with many of people at Tabor, some that are already gone, thinking of Dave, how we've gotten I don't know how my family has gotten so, you want to say lucky, blessed, I don't know the word, but to get to experience people here. And you are one of them. You're high on the list. Leah and I made a list of people we want to sit with and who we want to get to know even deeper that we may already know or we may not. But you are top of both of our lists. We didn't have anybody on both of our lists that we shared but you. And we love you and we're thankful for you. I think that you're going to be one of those that Jesus is going to have a real big job well done. You've done a lot of years of service. You had the best of partners with Jennifer. And we love her dearly too.
Sure do.
And we're just very thankful that you're in our life and especially on our podcast.
Yes, no kidding.
I appreciate that. And what I'm going to say this for the audience too, is what I appreciate about you guys is you guys are examples of how does a woman make full use of their gifts and abilities and opportunities. I think you guys have been a good example of that. And in a background that I grew up in where women always had a support role. Right? That was what women's calling was, some sort of support role. I don't think that's biblical. I think women have a God-called life like everybody else. And I think you guys live that. I appreciate that you do. Also, I love your husbands and I love your kids. And you guys are doing a great job.
They love you.
Yes, they do.
And I appreciate you. Just your life story. It feels like this is part of the reason that we're having this podcast is just to be encouraged. And even hearing how much that you turn to scripture is just like a reminder for me, for sure, to be more in the word and trusting God, really. You have to have an open-handed way of life.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you,
listening.
Jim.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yeah.
Great to talk with you guys.
We feel privileged. So until the next story.